Well, hello. Hi, Muttel. You there? All right. I know the sound is good. Welcome, everybody, and a good Erev Shabbos. I just had one of the most interesting last 20 minutes as the storm passed through Newtown. And boy, was it a storm, and the electric went out. There's no lights, no computers. I call Muttel, what are we going to do? Where are you, Muttel? I call Muttel, what are we going to do? It says, take out your iPhone. And luckily, our program, StreamYard.com, just made an app that we can use the iPhone. And it was actually starting to work about 8 minutes ago. And then, boom, there was light. Like the biblical verse, there was darkness, there was light. And here we are together, being able to continue with the regular programming of our pre-Shabbat sermon and song with Muttel. You know, this was a crazy week, a really incredible, so much going on, so much to think about. And I've told you many times, the most favorite and peaceful moment in my life is Shabbat at the Friday night table when I make Kiddush. Because when I make Kiddush, the first word is Vayichulu Hashamayim V'Aretz V'Chol Tzvam. God completed his work. And when you try to tune in, and when I am in tune with those words, somehow it finishes. Whatever happened this week is done. Now it's up to us to take what happened this past week and to turn it into something. See, things happen in our life, as we've mentioned many times. God sends us opportunities, challenges, struggles, whatever it is. What we choose to do with it is what makes it good, positive, and constructive. Vayichulu Hashamayim, I always look forward to those words where it just brings closure to the week and opens me up to the opportunity to connect to the good and all the positive that has happened. And this week, there's so much, as I mentioned. It's really I don't know what the right word is, but it was a heavy week politically with anti-Semitism. You see so much rhetoric from all over the place. We'll talk about later. And then one of our sister Chabad centers in Delaware got hit with a fire that destroyed the building. But there was some good news that I'm going to share that all helps us tie in together, of course, in the light of the timely messages of our timeless Torah, of our portion of the week. But before we begin, I have two short programming announcements, and that is that our sermon, as you know, it's 5 o'clock this week, and next week we'll do it at 5 o'clock. And as the sun sets earlier and Shabbat comes in earlier, we will be moving this session earlier until there's no time to do it, and we'll figure out what to do then. But for the next few weeks, next 2 weeks, this week and next week, it's 5 o'clock, and then stay tuned. That's on the spiritual side. And then I want to announce that to everyone who hasn't received our email, that on September 2nd, that is this, got to change the calendar. On Wednesday, we're going to have a special treat. Izzy, greatest kosher barbecue, but not just kosher, one of the greatest barbecue in the country, is bringing down his truck to our Chabad Lubavitch of Yardley Center. There are going to be pre-orders, and you can actually dine out. It's going to be outdoor in the beautiful yard, social distance. Each family can have its own table, and you can have some good food that happens to be kosher. If you want some information so you can pre-order, please let me know after this program, and I'll get you the link to order. But my dear friends, as I said, it was a very heavy week, and there's so much to talk about, so much to share, so much inspiration to share. But as we always know, you can't really get into the mind if you don't get into the heart. And we always start our program with the nigun, with a song, the pen of the soul, to kind of loosen ourselves up. You know, before you do a heavy exercise, heavy lifting, you got to stretch the muscles a little bit, open up, let the juices and energy flow. So we will do that with our resident nigun singer and musician, Muttel. But before we do that, before Muttel came around, there was always the old shofar. And this is, as we mentioned last time, the custom of the month. Every weekday of the month of Elul that precedes Rosh Hashanah, we blow the shofar. So let me share those heart, soul-stirring tunes with you. And on that note, from the stirring sound of the shofar to the wonderful soul-stirring sounds of Mattel's guitar, we're going to sing together Oseh Shalom, a song of peace, peace not only between warring countries, but peace between people with varying ideas. A prayer and a blessing that we all need now, as we'll speak about later in the Dvar Torah. But first, Mattel, Oseh Shalom.
Oseh Shalom Bimroma, Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel, Ve'imru. Amen. Oseh Shalom Bimroma, Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel, Ve'imru. Oseh Shalom Bimroma, Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel, Ve'imru. Amen. Ve'imru.
Thank you, Mattel. That was really a beautiful melody, a little original twist. It's always good to see what Mattel has up his sleeve. And in fact, Oseh Shalom, the creator of the universe who manages to make peace in all different spiritual, material worlds, should bring peace in all of our lives. Amen. My dear friends, I heard this a long time ago, but I think this is a very meaningful story, joke, whatever you want to call it. But for those of us who remember New Coke, there was a time that Coca-Cola tried to mess a little bit with its recipe and introduce what was called the New Coke. And the joke that was going on around, it's actually not a joke, it was a commercial that was going around then, was someone walks into the bar and tells the bartender, "Sir, can you please give me a Coke?" The bartender asks, "Well, what kind of Coke? The old Coke or the new Coke? The cherry Coke, the old cherry Coke, the new cherry Coke, the Diet Coke, the old Diet Coke, the new Diet Coke, the cherry vanilla Coke, the Diet old new cherry vanilla Coke?" The guy says, "Just give me a Pepsi." That was a commercial for Pepsi back then. Because sometimes things get so complicated. We want something, we know what we want, but because it gets just too complicated, we just give up and say, just give me something else. And that's not necessarily a good thing. A person needs to understand what they want, what is important for them, and remain strong and committed to try to get that. Because usually, the more something is important for you, the greater the challenges and the struggles will be, as we're taught in many places in our Torah, the Talmud, and Hasidic teachings, that God gives us purpose. And it's usually what you're needed for most, which comes most challenging to you, because that's what you need, and that's what your Yetzer Hara is trying to take you away from doing. So giving up is not a good trait. It doesn't get us too far. It's not an easy thing not to give up. But always remember the saying, the difference most of the times between someone who was successful and someone who failed was one more try. Things don't always happen right away. But if we persevere and don't give up, we can accomplish such great things. And that is an important message that is taught to us in this week's Torah reading, and that is so important for all of us as we deal with so many different things swirling around us in general, particularly this week, but not just this week. You know, the name of this week's portion is Ki Tetzei LaMilchama. It talks about Moses instructing the Jews how to conduct themselves when they go to war. And as they're entering the land of Israel, there are going to be times that they have to conquer other nations or defend themselves. So there's different laws and rules of how Jews engage in war. That's the name of the portion. But even when we're not engaged in a physical war, we're always engaged in a war. We're always fighting something. We're fighting inner struggles. We're fighting external struggles. We are at war with certain elements and influences that try to deviate us, try to get us to give up from what is very important. And that's why the Torah's message is timeless and timely, because even when you're not engaged in a physical war, the messages of this week's portion are so important in your own personal challenges and struggles. And at the very end of this week's portion, that Moses repeats something that is critical, not just as a mitzvah that was already said earlier on in the Torah, but because the situation comes up again and again and again. It came up as soon as the Jewish people were free and they entered the desert on their way out of Egypt. Jewish people experienced such great miracles. They were on a high. They had passion. They were going towards the promised land. There was nothing that's going to hold them back. And then something happens. And that thing that happens then leads to a certain instruction that God tells the Jewish people then, and Moses repeats now again, because it can happen and now as a transition into another reality. And what is that? It's the mitzvah, the instruction to vanquish Amalek, to get rid of the Amalekites completely, totally, that there's no remembrance of who they are. That's a pretty heavy statement. That's a pretty strong instruction from God to totally annihilate a certain nationality. Why? And more significantly for us today, what does that have to do with us today? We don't know who the Amalekites are, but we see it's so important. See, the Amalekites are not just a nation. They're not a people. They represent a certain attitude. Amalek were the people that put seeds of doubt into the Jewish people when they left Egypt. Amalek are the people that cool you off from a passionate drive towards something that you know is true. Those are the people that say, prove it to me. Explain it in a way that is totally logical. Now, we can't always explain things logically. You love someone. Explain why you love someone. And the truth of the matter is, if you explain why you love that person, then you don't really love that person. That's called conditional love. True love is real. We know what true love can mean. And that moment of true love cannot be explained. So there's certain truths that we know to be truth. and just can't be explained. But when someone challenges you, sometimes it could be just enough to cool you off and make you think, am I a little crazy? I can't explain it. But not everything that can't be explained isn't true. But that's Amalek. Amalek are the power, the inner voice that tells you, take it easy, cool off. What do you mean cool off? I know this to be true. And once you cool off a little bit of something you're passionate about, that leads you to eventually cool off completely, 100%. Because once you make a shift from a internal feeling of truth to transition it to a conditional truth, then it's not a truth. Like I said before, if I tell you why I love someone, I love them because, then it's not really the person you love. It's what comes after because that you love. And when that ceases to exist, there's no more love. So that little transition of saying because is the beginning of a whole different reality that leads to separation. That is why when Amalek attacked the Jewish people, as soon as he left Egypt, they were on a high. They were God's people. God is going to protect them. And they overcame, in fact, the war and engagement with Amalek. But the very fact that Amalek had the chutzpah, had the audacity to attack them, made them and people think, they are attackable. All right, maybe they overcame Amalek. We'll try. And now as the Jews enter the land of Israel, Moses tells them the same thing. My dear friends, this is such an important message because in life, we have to always find a balance between what we are passionate about and how we treat other people. Because sometimes we take this experience and say, get rid of Amalek completely and just don't let anyone cool off your passion. But sometimes in the drive of your passion, you may end up hurting the person that you love. And having that balance between eradicating anything that cools off your excitement and being true to who you really are is one of the biggest challenges of life. And sometimes it does get complicated. But when it gets complicated, don't choose the Pepsi. This isn't a paid advertisement. But when it isn't complicated, don't look for the less complicated road. Try to work it out in a very positive and meaningful way. And this week, this message to me hit home so strong on two levels. One level is last night was the end of the Republican National, or the RNC, the Republican Convention. Now, I'm not getting into the conventions, but I know when the Republican or whatever the second convention ever is over, that's kind of when the gun goes off and the race begins. Until then, things are a little bit cool. But now, as we get into election season, the passions of people's ideas are going to be blazing. People, if last election was so crazy in terms of people's passionate expression, I don't believe it's going to get any easier. And then the same idea is with anti-Semitism. This week we had two stories. One which allowed the idea of anti-Semitism to rear its ugly head. But I want to share with you a story of a person who did not allow Amalek to cool them off and showed us that we can stand up for what is right in a peaceful, dignified way, and we can succeed. We shouldn't give up just because we see things seem to be getting out of hand. There is a way forward, even through this mishugas. Let's start with the politics. My dear friends, I ask of you, be passionate. That's what our country is made for. If you are a Democrat or a Republican, respect your own opinion. but respect the other's opinion as well. I once went into an office, actually of a politician, and there was a saying, don't mistake kindness for weakness. And I want to reverse that. Don't mistake weakness for the lack of kindness. You can be passionate about what you believe, but you can still be kind. Being understanding to the other person's opinion, which is valid and legitimate. Everyone is entitled to their opinion, and everyone is entitled to be passionate about their opinion. Whether you're a Democrat or Republican, whether you support Trump or you support Biden, there's nothing wrong with the other person being passionate. But be kind. Allow them to be passionate. Don't be weak in your own ideas. The reason why we get so upset at when other people think differently than ourselves usually is because we are insecure in our own ideas. Allow healthy conversations to take place. Don't try to convince the other that they're wrong. Try to understand why they think they're right, even though you don't have to agree. We can be passionate. Don't let anyone cool you off. But don't let that passion overshadow your ability to be kind and understanding. Because when you're kind and understanding, although you disagree with the other person, then you are really the stronger person. And I ask you, because I have seen relationships fall apart 4 years ago that are still ingrained in people's minds. For what? Why aren't members speaking to each other? There's a deep love because they voted for the other party. Let them be passionate. And whether you're a winner or loser, it doesn't matter. There's another 4 years. There's other elections. I can tell you one thing. Whoever wins this next election, this country isn't going to fall apart. And therefore, don't let your relationships fall apart. Amalek is a very, very two-edged sword. Because on the one hand, it cools you off. And we should never allow people to cool themselves off of what they feel, but in a kind and passionate way. Which leads me to my story that I want to share. Because this week, we saw another, what appears to be, act of anti-Semitism. And maybe it hits a little closer to home because it happened at one of what we call our sister Chabad centers right over the border in Delaware, whom we are very close with, where the Chabad center was burnt down as a result of arson. And we think, oh my gosh, here it goes again. What's going on? And us in Philadelphia, we are maybe a little super sensitive to the anti-Semitism. We know what happened in the last few months when leaders or respected people in the community made anti-Semitic remarks, whether it was a football player or the leader of a local organization that's meant to bring harmony, the NAACP. And this leads me to that story of Rodney Muhammad, who tweeted, I think it was a tweet, a very anti-Semitic cartoon just a few weeks ago. And up until this week, despite the calls of Jewish leaders and government leaders for him to step down, he did not. And what was going through my mind is that if, God forbid, it would be the other way around, if a Jewish person tweeted anything against any organization, they would have been gone quickly. Are we losing the battle? And I was watching this story very closely, not just because it was Philadelphia, but because I wanted to see how this is going to end. This week, the national organization of NAACP took over the leadership of the Philadelphia chapter, and Rodney Muhammad will effectively be removed from his position because of his anti-Semitic tweet. That's an unbelievable accomplishment. Now, how did that happen? Anybody who would try and see the opposition to try to get this accomplished would have given up. But there was an individual whose name is Steven Rosenberg, who is the COO of the Jewish Federation of Philadelphia, who is, until they find their new CEO, the head of the federation. Now, I know Steven. I know Steven very well. And I'm very fortunate to know him because Steven is driven. He is passionate. Amalek has not gotten to him. He stood up. He stood strong. And he did not rest until this issue was resolved. And I don't know the details. He's a good friend of mine, but I don't pry for details. But I can guess that not only was he standing with pressure outside of the Jewish community, but I'm sure there meant much pressure from within our own Jewish community for him to back down. But he didn't back down because this was wrong. And when something is wrong, it has to be fought till the end. But I read the news and watched the way Stephen was fighting, like a Yid, like a Jew, passionate but kind, never degrading the other individual or the organization, but talking about the issue and being strong about the issue. And although I know he had many different challenges, I know because I'm in the community, but there were individuals that backed him strongly within the Jewish community. They stood up and they stood strong and they didn't let Amalek cool them off. But it's not just not letting Amalek cool you off, because sometimes when you're passionate and strong, you become obnoxious and you get in your own way. It's the passion together with the kindness and the commitment to the truth, which is the message that I have learned from Stephen. I envy Stephen. I know, like I said, I know him well as a good friend. He is so energetic and so driven and so passionate, but always remembers to text, to say good Shabbos, to reach out on a personal level to many different people, to be concerned about what's going on. This is the message that I want to take from this Parsha. The message about Amalek, about being passionate. Don't be cooled off of what you know is right. Proceed with conviction, but with kindness and with gentleness. And I want to conclude this in the context of Rosh Hashanah. As we approach Rosh Hashanah, as we said last week, we all know there were different balls that were dropped over the year that we should have done. In the context of this Parsha, we know there were things that were cooled off. Relationships because of politics. Things we know we were right because it just got too complicated. Choose one of those things as we enter Rosh Hashanah. Something you know is right. Something you know you got to get done. And if it got a little too complicated, so be it. That may be the indication that you just got to try one more time. Try a little harder. Don't let yourself be drawn down by the complication of the situation. Allow yourself to be inspired by what you can accomplish as a result from persevering. There are many ways that Jews go to battle. In a spiritual way, we go to battle with conviction, commitment, and human empathy and kindness. Ani lidodi, vidodi li. I am to my beloved, and my beloved is to me. And as we mentioned last week, when you are for your beloved, then you can anticipate a wonderful, healthy relationship where your beloved is to you. When you show kindness and gentleness to the other person, you can be passionate, you can be strong, you can be committed, and you will be effective. So, my dear friends, have a wonderful Shabbos. Think about this as we prepare to Rosh Hashanah. And in the spirit of Ani lidodi and dodi li, Our next nigun, our next song from Matal, is a song, the Dodi Li, a reflection of one of the passages in the Song of Songs of Shir HaShirim that reflect this beautiful theme. Mataleh.
This is a melody I learned from the songwriter Happy Hoffman.
Dodi li vani lo haroeh. Dodi li vani lo haroeh. Haroeh Hashoshani Mizot mina olam Mizot min haolaya Mizot min haolam Haolam Hashoshani Dodi li Dodi li Dodi li Haroeh Haroeh Hashoshani Mizot min haolam
Beautiful. That was really nice. Malta, you keep surprising us. Well, we're going to conclude with a Shabbat nigun, a Shabbat song of L'chuna Ranana. That's how we usually begin the Kabbalat Shabbat, the service that brings Shabbos in. L'chuna Ranana. Let's all go together and sing. It's been a tough week, but hopefully the message and the lesson of the positive things that happen is the light that allows us to shine through the darkness to be able to move forward. Before we conclude with the song, hopefully on Monday, I will send out an email about the whole range of Rosh Hashanah services and programs that we have. We've heard you. We've gotten the surveys back. We're developing services and opportunities for all considerations, in-house, in person, of course, all with social distancing, outdoors, shorter ceremonies, shorter services, longer services. Thank God we have an incredible staff of devoted rabbis and rebbitzins here at Lubavitch, Bucks County, and we're able to accommodate as many people as we can. Everyone will be able to have a personal, meaningful, spiritual experience. But before we get there, we got to be here, as they say. So it's Shabbos. Now let's conclude with the L'chuna Ranana from Mataleh.
L'chuna Ranana, L'chuna Ranana, L'chuna Ranana L'Adoshem, L'chuna Ranana, L'chuna Ranana, L'chuna Ranana L'Adoshem. Naria, L'tzor Yishenu, Nekadema B'todah. Naria, L'tzor Yishenu, Nekadema B'todah. L'chuna Ranana, L'chuna Ranana, L'chuna Ranana L'Adoshem, L'chuna Ranana, L'chuna Ranana, L'chuna Ranana L'Adoshem, L'chuna Ranana, L'chuna Ranana, L'chuna Ranana L'Adoshem, L'chuna Ranana, L'chuna Ranana, L'chuna Ranana L'Adoshem.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, Matal. Next week again, my dear friends, 5 o'clock. And don't forget, if you want some good, great kosher barbecue, or as I say, great, good barbecue that's kosher, Izzy's barbecue truck is coming to Lubavitch of Yardley on, what do we say? That's Tuesday. I actually keep forgetting, September 3rd or September 2nd. Just email me one of those 2 days. I don't have it in front of me. And I'll get you the link. You can pre-order and have wonderful dinner next week. My dear friends, as we said, have a good Shabbos. Let's prepare Rosh Hashanah. Let's be passionate. Let's be driven. Let's be optimistic, because if we don't cool ourselves off, but we're kind, we will accomplish great things. Ani lidodi, vidodi li. Good Shabbos.